My message to the losers: losers, look in the mirror. No? Well, maybe you should. Sorry. Well, that's my feeling. Losers, look in the mirror. For months, Democrats have been saying, how is this even close? And they're right, it wasn't. They could not conceive of a second Trump term, but they should have. When does America ever turn down second?
It started on one of those days where everyone figured the show would crawl along, predictable as ever. The hosts, smug in their routine, lounged in their seats, tossing recycled hot takes like party favors at a kid's bargain birthday. The air was thick with the same old chuckles, the same old echoes. And then bam, a twist no one saw coming. Through the doors strode a guest who hadn't arved to the usual game of nodding and grinning. He wasn't there to bow or flatter. He was there to rattle the stage itself, like a squirrel on an espresso bender loose in a chandelier factory.
Now they have reality they have to deal with. You know, we'll see what they do. See if they live up to their word. Trump says he's going to deport 12 million people. How are you going to get 12 million people back into Mexico? And today Trump said, I'm way ahead of you. Why do you think I left so many holes in the wall?
The moment he opened his mouth, the atmosphere snapped like a rubber band. What had been casual banter instantly hardened tension practically dropped to the floor and started doing push-ups. He didn't wade in gently. He lunged straight for the jugular of the show's carefully polished brand. Those so-called diverse perspectives? He tore the label right off, exposing what it really was, a stage where only one side got free rein to run laps unchecked. No sugarcoating, no padding for comfort. He laid it bare. The panel wasn't celebrating debate, it was enforcing an echo chamber. Step off their script, and boom, you're branded the villain faster than a cut to commercial.
It made me think, I'm sure every single member of the Saturday Night Live cast was a Harris supporter. But what if one of them wasn't? What if one of those cast members was for Trump? Would they have felt comfortable saying so? I really don't think so. They would have had to keep it to themselves. That's not a good place for us to be. And I remember when Elon Musk hosted, and this is well before he was a Trumper. This is 3 or 4 years. He was just the richest man in the world. And a number of the cast members on Saturday Night Live, they didn't want to deal with him. And I was thinking, really? You have Elon Musk on your show for a week. You could talk even about this issue that bothers you so much, that he's so rich and lots of people aren't. But no, you don't want to even deal with him. That's what I hate about it.
But he wasn't just tossing shade around like party glitter. No, he locked his aim with precision, calling out the show's razor-edged intolerance for any viewpoint that strayed even a step to the right of center, especially if it leaned conservative even. Slightly, the message was clear: not welcome, not tolerated, not even up for debate.
Harris would be the first woman president, first black woman president, and first Asian president. But I don't vote for who will be the first. I vote for who will win. And for whatever reason, Harris has never been popular. You can count the number of delegates she won in the 2020 primaries on one hand, as long as that hand has no fingers. Sometimes life isn't fair. It's not fair that she's not popular. She's intelligent and accomplished, and in fact was put in charge of the border. And look at how... Okay, bad example.
According to him, The View wasn't some warm, friendly clubhouse for exchanging ideas. Not at all. To him, it was a relentless echo chamber, spinning the same tired opinions on loop like a busted mixtape stuck on repeat. And the way he framed it, ouch, you could almost feel the sting ripple across the set.
By the way, I hope is still a friend. We can disagree with each other. Should not be canceled or put off her show, as much as I totally disagree with her crazy statement. Free speech. She should be there. She shouldn't get a timeout.
Not every single thing has to be for everybody.
Right.
We can have platforms that have stuff on them that not everyone on that platform or who consumes stuff on that platform enjoys. And The View is a particularly weird place to do it.
Robert Walters invented it a long time ago, but it's The View.
Well,
that's the problem in America.
But
there is one view,
right, and
one
that's clearly
true opinion, and everybody else can go sit and...
And this was the moment The View really began to sweat. After tearing the mask off their so-called diversity of thought, he didn't ease up or pivot to safety. Nope, he twisted the dial past 10 and slammed it straight to 11. His eyes locked onto the camera, then swept across the audience like a hawk wired on triple shots of espresso, scanning every face. And then came the line, the kind of line that makes the air crackle. Losers need to look in the mirror. Not a playful jab. Not even close. It was a missile, direct and unmistakable, targeting liberal media figures who unravel whenever elections don't bend to their liking.
Going to sometimes have a very different opinion. And the answer is not to make them sit in a corner for 2 weeks. That is insulting. It's so insulting to make a 65-year-old, the person at ABC News said, I've asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments. Reflect. How insulting for someone of her age, who's a sophisticated person.
The whole point of free speech is we don't need free speech when we're right, when everyone agrees with us. We need free speech when we're wrong. We need free speech to make mistakes. We need free speech to say really unpopular things. And one of the reasons I'm always proud to come on this show, and I suspect you feel the same way, Catherine, is this is the only space left on television where people can speak freely and not be terrified.
He waded straight into the chaos, pointing directly at the collective confusion and outrage that erupted when Trump's popularity began to surge again. The hosts of The View, much like half the media ecosystem, looked utterly baffled, as if reality itself had glitched. But here's the kicker: they never once stopped to ask if they had misread the room, if maybe their carefully curated narratives had blinded them. No self-reflection, no pause. Instead, they defaulted to the same routine, wagging fingers, casting blame outward like toddlers insisting the dog ate the homework. That's the behavior he zeroed in on, and then he dropped the hammer. He likened their denial to willfully refusing to see what's right in front of them. To him, they never truly believed Trump could return, because they were trapped inside their own echo chamber, opinions ricocheting endlessly like a pinball with no escape.
They didn't vote for him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
black people
they thought that he was
one of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny, you're missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I'm white, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not, let me just ask, what stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect the two.
Yes, you can. There's a lot
Hold on.
He dropped a quip so casually it felt like an afterthought, but it hit like a grenade. America, he said, almost never says no to a sequel. Movies, presidents, pop culture, you name it. This country thrives on the encore. And in that instant, you could practically hear the hum of short circuits firing behind the hosts' painted smiles. Their expressions faltered for a beat, eyes flashing with that rare look of unpreparedness. This wasn't part of the script. They weren't ready for someone bold enough to voice the quiet truth half the country had been shouting at their TVs for years. And they definitely weren't ready to face the darker suggestion hidden in his words that maybe, just maybe, the winners they fancied themselves to be were really just dodging reality. That's when the tension in the studio surged. The panel scrambled, and like clockwork, they lobbed one of their most reliable grenades: immigration. A sharp, rehearsed question, dripping with intent. How could Trump possibly deport millions of undocumented immigrants? It wasn't curiosity, it was a trap. A move meant to box him in, force a stumble, draw blood. But he didn't flinch. He countered with a smirk and a line so razor-edged it sliced the air clean in half. Trump's already ahead of you. Why do you think he left so many holes in the wall? Boom! The words landed like a high five to the face. The audience erupted, half in laughter, half in shock, while the panel sat frozen, unsure whether to laugh it off, push back, or act like the moment hadn't just rocked the room. And still, he kept swinging, pivoting effortlessly. He widened his target, now aiming squarely at the liberal media at large. Late-night hosts, Hollywood celebrities, self-styled pundits, he shredded their carefully staged bravado. The grand speeches, the dramatic vows to flee the country if Trump ever won, followed by the anticlimax of nothing. Nobody left. Nobody acted. He called it what it was: performative outrage. Scripted, hollow, shallow, and that sting cut deeper than any policy debate. And then he set his sights on Saturday Night Live, that bastion of edgy, free-thinking comedy he exposed as anything. But he dropped the unspeakable question like a bomb. What if a cast member secretly supported Trump? Could they even admit it? His answer was brutal in its simplicity: zero chance. Keep quiet, bury your views, or get iced out by your own colleagues. Not for crimes, not for hate, just for daring to vote differently. That moment landed like a gut punch, not because it was about Trump anymore, but because it cut deeper into something everyone in the room could feel but few dared name. Fear, not the kind that creeps in the dark, but the kind that silences voices. Fear of speaking honestly. Fear of being branded a traitor by your own side for stepping even an inch outside the approved narrative. The picture he painted was savage, a culture that preached freedom of expression but demanded every word be scripted to match the right chorus. To drive the point home, he resurrected the Elon Musk SNL saga. Not because Musk leaned conservative, he didn't, but because he was rich, successful, larger than life. Cast members pouted, some flat out refused to perform, others showed up but dragged their feet like sulking teenagers forced to attend dinner. He called it what it was: childish, smug, a wasted opportunity to engage with someone influential, all tossed aside simply because of bias. Then he detonated the line that hung in the air like smoke: "You're brats, you're snobs, and people are sick of it." The silence that followed screamed louder than any applause could. Then came the moment that truly rattled The View. Thinking they'd regained control, the hosts shifted to the Middle East safe ground, or so they believed. But instead of stumbling, he veered hard into blunt truth. No soft phrasing, no delicate sympathy, just raw, unfiltered facts. One host attempted a rebuttal, but he shut it down so fast the audience erupted in cheers. At the table, dead silence. And this wasn't awkward silence, it was revelation. For a show built on sparring and clever retorts, they suddenly had nothing. No counterpunch, no witty escape hatch, because he wasn't tossing around opinions for sport. He was stripping the varnish off their entire act. He didn't demand they choose sides. He demanded honesty. And when honesty hit the room froze. The tension was thick enough to slice with a butter knife, yet he kept pressing forward. He pulled up one of The View's most controversial moments: the suspension of a co-host for a comment the network didn't approve. He didn't excuse the remark. He admitted it was wild. But cancel her? Absolutely not. She shouldn't have been yanked off the air. He went after the sheer absurdity of it all, mocking the idea of telling a grown woman in her 60s to reflect and learn like she was some scolded schoolgirl sent to detention. His voice dripped with razor-edged sarcasm as he shredded the network's decision. Reflect on what? He asked. What grand ripple effect could her words possibly have? Were there neo-Nazis somewhere, sitting on their couches, waiting for permission slips from a panelist on The View before springing into action? The imagery was ridiculous, and he knew it. He wasn't defending the comment itself, he made that clear. What he was defending was the principle, the right to speak without being treated like a misbehaving child. And in doing so, he flipped the mirror on The View, exposing it as the very thing it insists it's not: a stage where one wrong sentence can get you booted. The message rang loud and simple. Free speech isn't just for the opinions we agree with, it's especially for the ones we don't. Then he zoomed out, lifting the conversation to a higher altitude and aiming at an even bigger target: the illusion of freedom in modern media. We don't need free speech when we're right. We need it when we're wrong, he declared. And you could feel that line land like a gut punch, sharp enough to knock the air out of the room. He explained that true freedom meant the space to make mistakes, to say things that might be unpopular, and still be allowed to speak the next day. Then came the curveball. He praised the very show he was on, not The View, but the program hosting him at that moment. He called it one of the rare spaces left on television where people could still voice raw thoughts without fear of being immediately exiled. A place where you could challenge ideas, even be wrong without being tossed into the flames. And then the ultimate comparison landed. Have you ever seen anything like that on The View? The answer didn't need to be spoken. Everyone already knew. On The View, dissent isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. Step out of line, you're gone. Say something unpopular, and you're shamed into silence. That was the heart of his takedown. He shifted the spotlight to the 2020 election and the media's obsession with boiling Trump's support down to one tired refrain: racism and misogyny. That narrative had been repeated so often by the panel, it sounded less like analysis and more like a broken record on autopilot. But he shattered that wall with a blunt, undeniable truth. Most people weren't voting out of hate. They were voting out of desperation. Trump supporters, he argued, weren't caricatures driven by bigotry. They were ordinary Americans struggling to keep their heads above water financially, emotionally, socially. They weren't sitting around dissecting sound bites or obsessing over personality quirks. They wanted stability, safety, and a fighting chance to provide for their families. When Trump addressed those needs, even with his rough, messy delivery, people listened. And that stung, especially when he pointed out something the media rarely acknowledged. Even among demographics the press assumed were guaranteed to lean left, surprising pockets of support for Trump appeared. Not everyone, of course, but enough to matter. Then he went further, skewering the snobbery baked into elite commentary, the condescending assumption that anyone without a degree who dared vote conservative must be ignorant or worse, hateful. Stats are stats, he said, but a stat doesn't tell you I voted for Trump because I'm racist. That arrogance, he warned, is exactly why so many Americans feel dismissed, mocked, and silenced. And just like that, The View's carefully constructed narrative about why people vote crumbled on live television. But he wasn't finished. He saved one final strike, a question that cut straight to the core of modern media's stranglehold on dialogue. What happens to people who just want to ask questions? What if someone disagrees with the official story, not out of hatred, not out of extremism, but because their own life experience tells them something different? That's when the silence hit heavy, suffocating. A silence you could feel in your bones. He laid it bare. This refusal to even hear opposing voices has infected nearly every corner of left-leaning media. One true opinion, endlessly enforced. Step outside the approved script, and you're shoved into the shadows. He reminded the audience of something many had forgotten. When Barbara Walters first created The View, the mission was clear: a table where women from different walks of life could sit down, share perspectives, and spark honest conversation. A place where disagreement wasn't danger, it was the whole point. But look at it now. One perspective on repeat, looping endlessly. Step out of line, and you're treated like a virus infecting the body. He didn't just make the claim, he dropped receipts. Hosts quietly sidelined. Guests shouted down mid-sentence. Segments cut short the second things grew uncomfortable. And woven through it all, that suffocating pressure to nod along, to perform agreement, even when everyone knows it feels fake. Then came the question no one at that table had ever dared ask out loud. What does that do to the audience? Millions tune in, expecting debate, dialogue, maybe even the occasional clash of ideas. Instead, they get recycled conclusions, the same points wrapped in slightly different packaging. Try challenging it and you're met with laughter, with exaggerated eye rolls, or worse, silence. And that silence isn't strength, it isn't composure. It's fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of what happens if viewers start thinking for themselves. He stripped it down to its simplest truth. Having a different opinion shouldn't make you the enemy. But that's exactly what it's become. And whether you loved him or loathed him, you couldn't deny it. He'd ripped the curtain wide open. The View wasn't just exposed, it was undressed. Smiles, slogans, applause, they couldn't cover the truth sitting right there at the table, staring them down and refusing to shut up. Then came the crack that splintered their polished facade. A panelist tried to push back, tried to redirect the conversation back to safe waters, and suddenly chaos erupted. Voices overlapped, tones sharpened, and the familiar pattern kicked in: smother the dissent, smooth it over, pretend it never happened. But this time, the disruption was the point. He called it in real time, proof that even the tiniest opposing thought sent the show spiraling into panic. One idea outside the script and the mood shifted instantly. The energy dropped. You could almost see producers behind the scenes scrambling, herding everyone back to the safe corral of talking points. But it was too late. He'd already made the point clear. On shows like The View, dissent isn't debated, it's erased. Say something as simple as, maybe people aren't just voting out of hate, and watch the tension crawl up the walls. Conversation doesn't deepen, it dies. And that, he warned, is the real danger. Not disagreement itself, but the fact that disagreement has been rebranded as threat. Not dialogue, not challenge, a threat. And until that changes, he said, the audience these shows claim to represent will keep slipping away. Because when the only view allowed is The View, the truth doesn't just get ignored, it gets buried.